When I saw my daughter's face as every other child in the family received their special gift, something broke inside me. My brother-in-law Marcus had orchestrated it perfectly, making sure Emily was the only one excluded during the annual family meeting. This wasn't a mistake. This was the final move in his years-long campaign to destroy what I had built. First, he stole my financial algorithms. Then he blocked my daughter's college dreams by secretly withdrawing her recommendation letters. Then he planted fake evidence of an affair to turn my wife against me. All this from the man who destroyed my father 20 years ago using the exact same playbook. The Reed family watched with smug satisfaction as Emily realized she was getting nothing. They expected tears. They expected shame. What they didn't expect was me calmly handing my daughter an envelope. The choice I made that day would either save my family or destroy us all. But watching Marcus smile as he hurt my child, I knew there was only one possible response. He thought I was weak because I was quiet. He was about to learn that architects don't just build things. We can bring them down with surgical precision. The day Marcus Reed recruited me from Goldman Sachs, he called it bringing real talent into the family business. Standing in his corner office at Westcrest Capital with Manhattan sprawled beneath us, he placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "David, I've watched you build financial models that predict market movements 3 steps ahead. That's the kind of mind Westcrest needs." What he didn't say was that he needed someone like me. Methodical, detail-oriented, private, someone who could create systems so efficient they'd run invisibly. I met Claire at the company Christmas party 6 months later. Unlike her charismatic brother, she possessed a quiet intensity, asking questions that went beneath surface answers. When I explained my algorithmic approach to identifying undervalued assets, she didn't smile politely and move on like others. Instead, she challenged my assumptions and improved my methodology. Our courtship was much like my career trajectory, deliberate, thoughtful, with every step carefully considered. When Emily was born 3 years later, Marcus stood as godfather, championing our daughter as the future of Westcrest. He gifted her first shares of company stock in an ornate frame that hung in her nursery. I didn't know it then, but every gift from Marcus came with invisible strings. For 14 years, I built Westcrest's quantitative analysis division into the firm's secret weapon. My team's models predicted market shifts with uncanny accuracy, creating billions in value while I remained in the background. Marcus took the spotlight, charming investors and regulators alike. We complemented each other perfectly, his vision and charisma paired with my precision and systems. The first discrepancy appeared in quarterly reports I reviewed personally. A subtle pattern of fund allocations, institutional money flowing briefly through our managed accounts before disappearing into vehicles I couldn't trace. When I mentioned it to Marcus, he laughed. "That's board-level strategic initiative Delta. Need to know only, I'm afraid. Dad started it decades ago." I accepted his explanation. Family businesses have their secrets. I wasn't blood after all. Just the architect, building the house. Emily grew into her father's mind and her mother's intensity. By 17, her bedroom walls displayed financial models alongside college pennants. Princeton topped her list. Her application was flawless. Perfect SAT scores, national math competitions, summer internships at prestigious firms. More importantly, she was legacy twice over. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs when Marcus suddenly became interested in her application process. The morning of the board meeting where I planned to propose expanding my division, Marcus called everyone in early. "Urgent strategic discussion," the email said. I arrived to find the full board already seated. Marcus stood at the head of the table, slides showing a restructuring plan that eliminated my entire division. "David's team has built an incredible foundation," he said, not meeting my eyes. "But machine learning has made their approach obsolete. We're shifting to an AI-driven model through acquisition." The vote was unanimous, except for mine. 14 years of work, dismantled in a 15-minute presentation. As board members filed out, Marcus finally approached me. "The severance is generous. Claire and Emily will be taken care of." I'm still Chief Risk Officer, I said quietly, and a board member. He smiled, that perfect Marcus smile that never quite reached his eyes. Of course, we'd never let you go entirely. Family is everything. That afternoon, Emily's Princeton response arrived. Not the thick acceptance packet she expected, but a thin letter explaining her application had been waitlisted, pending character reference verification. When we called the admissions office, the representative was apologetic but clear. One of her recommendation letters was withdrawn with concerns about her character and academic integrity. Given the source's connection to the university, we had to take it seriously. I knew then exactly what was happening, but I needed proof. That night, I accessed the company servers using emergency protocols only the Chief Risk Officer possessed. What I found wasn't just the diversion of company assets. It was the systematic erasure of everything I'd built, reattributed to consultants who didn't exist. Every algorithm, every model, every innovation, all stripped of my authorship. In Emily's study, I found her crying over her laptop. Princeton sent another email, she whispered. They've moved me from waitlist to rejection. Someone told them I cheated on my SATs. I sat beside her, my mind racing through calculations far different from any I'd run before. Who would do that? She asked. For the first time, I saw the pattern, with perfect clarity. Not just in the numbers, but in the years of subtle positioning. Marcus hadn't brought me in for my talent. He'd brought me in to build something he could take. I don't know, I lied, kissing her forehead. But I promise you, we'll find out. I didn't say what I was truly thinking, that I would destroy the man who hurt my daughter. That night, I began creating a new system, one that would capture every transaction, every communication, every move Marcus made, not to prevent what was happening, but to understand its full scope. The architect in me knew, before you can dismantle a structure, you must first understand exactly how it was built. Marcus thought this was just about money, about power, about taking credit for my work. What he failed to understand was that I had learned from my father's mistakes. My father, Thomas Parker, the man Marcus had destroyed 20 years earlier using the exact same playbook. The public story was that my father committed financial fraud. The truth? Marcus had stolen his algorithms and framed him, just as he was now doing to me. I wasn't just fighting for my career, or even for Emily's future. I was fighting to rectify a pattern of destruction that had claimed my father's life. As I studied the financial empire Marcus had built, I saw its vulnerabilities, the weak points in its foundation, the structural flaws that could bring it all down with surgical precision. I am an architect by training and temperament. I build systems designed to withstand pressure. But every architect also knows exactly how their creations can fall. Marcus had made one critical mistake. He gave every child a gift except my daughter. And in that moment of cruelty, he revealed the full measure of his character. He couldn't have known that when I would pull out that envelope at the family meeting, it wouldn't just contain a trip to Iceland. It would contain his complete destruction. For 3 months, I maintained the perfect facade of the defeated executive. I arrived precisely at 9 a.m. to an office stripped of responsibility. I smiled politely in meetings where my input was no longer solicited. I accepted lunch invitations from colleagues whose awkward sympathy was thinly disguised self-preservation. Behind this carefully constructed image of resignation, I was building something entirely different. Each night, after Claire and Emily slept, I transformed our home office into Command Central. My custom software logged every transaction flowing through Westcrest, identifying patterns invisible to standard auditing. I traced Marcus's financial architecture, the shell companies nested within holding companies, the offshore accounts cycling assets through jurisdictions chosen for their opacity. The genius of his system wasn't its complexity, but its patience. Small amounts moved constantly, never enough to trigger alerts. Only when mapped over years did the pattern emerge. Roughly 2.3% of all managed assets had been systematically diverted, a percentage small enough to be attributed to standard management fees and expenses. Except these funds never reached Westcrest's accounts. They flowed instead through a labyrinth ending at Helios Partners, a private entity owned entirely by Marcus. I didn't just want to expose him, I wanted to own him. Claire noticed my late nights. "Are you looking for another position?" she asked one evening, setting a cup of coffee beside my keyboard. "Just making sure our personal finances are insulated from whatever's happening at Westcrest," I answered truthfully, if incompletely. Her hand rested briefly on my shoulder. "You know Marcus will take care of us," she said, but something in her voice had changed. A slight questioning where absolute confidence had once been. That slight inflection was my first indication that the foundation of our family was shifting too. The following week, Marcus invited us to Sunday dinner at his Westchester estate, an unusual occurrence since Emily's rejection. Throughout the elaborate meal, he was the perfect concerned brother, inquiring about my job prospects while subtly emphasizing the importance of moving on, gracefully. "I've been thinking," he announced over dessert. "Emily shouldn't give up on the Ivy League. I have connections at Cornell who might overlook the concerns from Princeton." Emily stiffened beside me. "What concerns?" she asked quietly. Marcus's expression registered perfect surprise. "Oh, I assumed you knew. The academic integrity questions." Looking back, that moment was his first significant mistake. His need to twist the knife revealed too much. The drive home was silent, until Claire finally spoke. "How would Marcus know about Emily's rejection reasons? We never told the family the details." Something was unraveling, not just for me, but for Claire too. The next morning, I met with Jeffrey Hammond, Westcrest's longtime outside counsel. Over 20 years, he had structured every major transaction for the company, but remained conspicuously uninvolved in recent deals. "Off the record," I said after securing his office against surveillance, "I need to understand the structural changes happening at Westcrest." Hammond studied me carefully. 14 years you've been there, and this is our first private conversation. I prefer to work within established systems, until those systems are weaponized against you." Hammond reached into his desk and removed a file. 3 months ago, Marcus asked me to review documents for a major reorganization. The documents included evidence of financial improprieties attributed to you. My expression didn't change. "And your assessment?" "That someone went to elaborate lengths to create a perfect paper trail leading to you. Too perfect." Hammond leaned forward. "I've represented the Reed family since Marcus was in college. His father built Westcrest on relationships and integrity. Whatever Marcus is doing, it isn't what his father intended." "What happened to his father's former partner?" I asked quietly. Hammond's eyebrows rose slightly. "Thomas Parker? Financial fraud charges. He lost everything. Died of a heart attack during the trial." He paused. "No relation to you, I assume?" "Distant cousin," I lied smoothly. I didn't tell him that Thomas Parker was my father, that Marcus had stolen his algorithms and framed him exactly as he was now doing to me. Some weapons are best kept, concealed until the perfect moment. That night, I registered 7 new shell companies in jurisdictions that wouldn't require ownership disclosure. Through these entities, I began the careful process of acquiring positions in Marcus's hidden holdings, starting with companies furthest removed from Westcrest's direct operations. At home, the tension was building. Claire received mysterious texts that caused her to leave rooms for private conversations. Emily withdrew further into herself, her college applications abandoned. Twice I found Claire examining our phone records, and once she returned home unexpectedly during the day, the surprise in her eyes suggesting she was checking on something or someone. The answer came when I returned early from a meeting to find Marcus sitting in our living room with Claire. "Just looking out for my sister," he said smoothly, rising to leave. "These transitions constrain the strongest marriages." His hand squeezed my shoulder as he passed. "Nothing is more important than family, David. Remember that." After he left, Claire wouldn't meet my eyes. "He's concerned about you. Says you've been making inquiries about old company transactions, that you might be building a case against Westcrest." "What do you think I'm doing?" I asked. I don't know anymore, she whispered. You're so distant. Marcus showed me there are hotel charges, meetings not on your calendar. The pieces aligned with mathematical precision. Not content with taking my career and daughter's future, Marcus was now undermining my marriage with fabricated evidence of infidelity. I never expected him to destroy my family from within, but I should have. That night, I added a new component to my system, one that would track Marcus's communications. If he was building a case against me, I needed to know its full dimensions. 2 days later, Claire approached me in my home office, her face pale. I need to see exactly what you've been working on, she said. All of it. For 3 hours, I walked her through the evidence, the financial diversions, the systematic dismantling of my division, the fabricated misconduct that led to Emily's rejection. Why would he do this, she finally asked. Because your brother has built his entire life on taking credit for other people's work, I replied. And I built something too valuable for him to resist. Claire was silent for a long moment. There's something you should know, she finally said. Before you joined Westcrest, there was another architect, a man who built the original quantitative systems. Marcus said he tried to steal company secrets. What happened to him? Marcus produced evidence that he was selling proprietary algorithms to competitors. The man lost everything, his reputation, his career. Marcus told the family he'd been generous by not pressing charges. She swallowed hard. His name was Thomas Parker. My father, I said quietly. Claire's eyes widened. You knew all this time? I've known since the day Marcus recruited me. What I didn't know was how methodically he would repeat history. Why would you work for the man who destroyed your father? I turned back to my screens, where Marcus's financial empire was mapped in glowing lines of code. Because architects understand that the most important part of any structure is its foundation. Marcus built his empire on my father's work. I've spent 14 years building its next evolution. I met her eyes. And now I'm going to take it all back. Claire studied me for a long moment. Then something shifted in her expression. The loyalty to her brother that had been conditioned over decades gave way to something harder, more resolute. Tell me what you need me to do, she said. That was the moment I knew we would win. Marcus had spent a lifetime cultivating power through fear and manipulation, but he had never understood the fundamental truth about structures built on false foundations. They all eventually collapse. The annual charity gala marked 5 months since my effective demotion. Claire and I arrived dressed for the occasion, she an elegant black eye in the same Brooks Brothers suit I'd worn for years. The contrast with Marcus in his bespoke tuxedo was precisely as he'd designed it, the king and the functionary. David, Claire, Marcus approached, champagne in hand. I've been meaning to call. I think we found the perfect opportunity for you. Strategic advisor to a fintech startup we're incubating. Not board level, but the compensation is fair. The position would remove me entirely from Westcrest while maintaining the appearance of family loyalty. Before I could respond, he continued. And excellent news. I've spoken with the Cornell admissions director. They're willing to review Emily's application personally. Claire's grip tightened on my arm. That's very thoughtful, Marcus, but Emily has decided to explore options beyond the Ivy League. His smile flickered momentarily. She shouldn't let one setback define her future. The Reed name still carries significant weight. Parker, I corrected, quietly. Her name is Parker. Something dangerous flashed in Marcus's eyes before he was called away to greet major donors. As he took the stage to announce Westcrest's new Family Legacy Initiative, a $20 million scholarship fund for underprivileged students, I stepped outside to take a call from Hammond. I couldn't have planned the timing better myself. The SEC has opened a confidential inquiry into Westcrest's fund allocations, he said without preamation. They're particularly interested in Helios Partners. How long before Marcus is notified? Standard procedure gives the company 20 days to prepare documentation, but given Westcrest's political connections, I'd expect a discreet warning much sooner. I thanked him and rejoined Claire as Marcus concluded his speech to thunderous applause. Creating opportunity for the next generation is our moral obligation, he proclaimed, eyes shining with practiced sincerity. Family is everything, loyalty is everything. Words he would soon choke on. Later that evening, Marcus cornered me at the bar. The board is concerned about unauthorized access to company servers, he said casually. Security logs show your credentials were used to access trading algorithms that are no longer in your purview. A technical error, I'm sure, I replied. I'll have it review my access protocols. His hand gripped my shoulder, friendly to any observer but unmistakably threatening. Be careful, David. Digital signatures are remarkably persistent. If proprietary information were to appear outside our firewalls, the origin would be quite traceable. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Either I would be caught investigating his fraud, or he would frame me for corporate espionage. Exactly, as he had done to my father. What Marcus didn't realize was that I'd specifically triggered those security alerts to distract him from my true activities. That night, I accelerated my timetable. Using the shell companies I'd established, I began systematically acquiring positions in Marcus's hidden network of companies, not the largest or most valuable, but the ones most vulnerable to regulatory scrutiny, the connective tissue of his financial body. Meanwhile, Claire executed her part of our plan. As a Reed by birth, she had access to family documents I could never obtain. Through her family's longtime estate attorney, she discovered the original partnership agreement between Marcus's father and mine, a document that had mysteriously disappeared during my father's disgrace. The terms are explicit, Claire said, spreading the papers across our kitchen table. Any proprietary trading algorithms developed under the partnership remain jointly owned intellectual property, even if one partner exits the firm, which means every algorithm derived from my father's original work is partially yours by inheritance, she finished, including the ones you've spent 14 years perfecting. Looking back, that discovery changed everything. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. With Hammond's guidance, I filed sealed patents on key innovations I'd developed at Westcrest, not to claim ownership, but to establish a documented timeline of development. Simultaneously, I prepared detailed documentation for the SEC, creating a parallel investigation that would complement, rather than trigger, Marcus's trap. Emily gradually emerged from her depression, focusing her formidable intellect on understanding what was happening. One evening she found me reviewing transaction records. "You're taking down Uncle Marcus, aren't you?" she asked directly. I considered lying, then remembered she had inherited my facility for pattern recognition. "Yes," I answered simply. "Because of what he did to my Princeton application?" "That's part of it." She studied the financial flows on my screen. "These shell companies. You're buying pieces of his hidden holdings." I nodded, impressed by how quickly she'd grasped the strategy. "But you're not targeting his largest assets," she observed. "You're acquiring companies that form connections between his legitimate and illegitimate businesses. Control doesn't always require majority ownership," I explained. "Sometimes it only requires positioning at key structural intersections." She considered this. "Like removing specific support beams rather than trying to lift an entire building." "Exactly." Emily sat beside me. "I want to help." I'd never been prouder of my daughter than at that moment. For the next month, she applied her fresh perspective to identifying vulnerabilities I had missed. Her analysis revealed a pattern in Marcus's acquisitions. He systematically targeted companies founded by men nearing retirement with daughters, positioned as successors. In each case, the daughters were eventually edged out of leadership positions. "It's not just about the money," Emily said. "He specifically targets female heirs." The pattern clarified something I hadn't fully articulated. Marcus didn't just want success. He needed to dominate in specifically gendered ways. His betrayal of my daughter wasn't just collateral damage in his plan to steal my work. It was an essential element of how he viewed power. As our counter-strategy developed, I received an unexpected call from Westcrest's CFO, Richard Harmon. a longtime Reed family ally. The quarterly compliance review flagged anomalies in transaction records, he said without greeting. Specifically, algorithm-approved trades that bypassed normal verification channels. Sounds serious, I replied, neutrally. Which division? That's just it. The origin point was your old quantitative team, but the authorizations carry Marcus's digital signature. He's claiming you must have compromised his credentials. That would be quite an achievement considering my reduced access. A long pause followed. This isn't the first irregularity I've seen, David, but it's the first that can't be explained by standard procedures. What are you suggesting, Richard? Nothing, just documenting my due diligence. He cleared his throat. The records indicate substantial positions in American Community Bank and Meridian Healthcare were liquidated without committee approval. Both were legitimate West Crest investments that provided clean pathways into Marcus's hidden network. By identifying them, Richard was either warning me or signaling awareness of something larger unfolding. Thank you for the information, I said carefully. I assume you've notified Marcus? Of course, he said he'd handle it personally. I knew exactly what that meant. Marcus was preparing to eliminate me entirely. The following morning, Marcus called an emergency board meeting. Standing before the gathered directors, he presented evidence of a coordinated attempt to undermine West Crest's proprietary trading systems. Digital forensics, he explained, had traced the intrusion to access points matching my credentials. As he spoke, security personnel appeared at the boardroom entrance. This is difficult for me personally, Marcus said, his expression grave. But we have evidence that David has been selling our proprietary algorithms to competitors possibly for years, just as he had done to my father. That's a serious accusation, I replied calmly. I assume you have documentation beyond server logs that could easily be manipulated. Marcus smiled tightly. We've identified the recipient entities. Interestingly, they share structural similarities with vehicles your father established before his unfortunate legal troubles. The trap was sprung, exactly as I had anticipated. I had allowed Marcus to build his case against me while building something far more substantial in return. Given the family considerations, Marcus continued, I've convinced the board to handle this internally. You'll tender your resignation effective immediately, forfeit all equity positions, and sign a comprehensive NDA. In return, we won't pursue criminal charges. I looked around the table at board members who had known me for 14 years, none of whom would meet my eyes. The same board that had witnessed my father's destruction was now participating in mine. I'll need to consult with my attorney, I said, rising from the table. Marcus's smile broadened. Of course. Take all the time you need. Security will escort you from the building. For everyone's protection, your credentials have been suspended. As planned, I surrendered my company phone and laptop to security. The devices contained exactly what Marcus expected to find. Evidence of my interest in his activities, but nothing of my actual strategy. That evening, Claire received the call we'd been expecting from her mother. The family is devastated by David's actions, she reported. Marcus is being hailed as magnanimous for not pressing charges. The narrative was established. The trap was complete, and everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. What Marcus failed to understand was that sometimes the most dangerous opponent isn't the one fighting back. It's the one who appears to surrender. Winter settled over Manhattan, 3 months since my forced resignation. To the financial community, I had become a cautionary tale. The trusted insider who betrayed his benefactor. Carefully placed stories in industry publications detailed my alleged corporate espionage without directly naming me. The legal department's method of destroying my reputation while avoiding libel. I embraced the professional isolation, using it as cover for the next phase. Through the network of shell companies now strategically embedded throughout Marcus's financial ecosystem, I began exerting subtle pressure on his operations. Minor financial reporting requirements suddenly became complicated. Routine regulatory approvals encountered unexpected delays. Nothing catastrophic, just enough friction to require Marcus's personal attention. Being underestimated had become my greatest advantage. Meanwhile, Claire navigated the treacherous waters of family loyalty. To maintain our access to information, she expressed measured concern about my fragile state to her brother, while remaining firmly supportive in public. The performance required extraordinary control, especially as her mother and sisters overtly distanced themselves from our family. Marcus is hosting the annual family investment meeting next month, Claire reported after Sunday brunch with her mother. He's announced a special agenda item, the distribution of educational trust funds for all the grandchildren. We both understood the significance. For 15 years, the Reed family had maintained a tradition of establishing educational trusts for each child upon turning 18. Emily's birthday had passed 3 months earlier without mention of her trust. "Will we be invited?" I asked. "Mother says Marcus insisted we attend. He specifically wants Emily there." The timing was not coincidental. Marcus had been systematically liquidating positions that my hidden acquisitions had made vulnerable. Precisely the reaction I had anticipated. The family meeting would be his opportunity to reassert control over the narrative, while delivering one final humiliation to Emily. "I've been thinking about that trip we discussed," I said carefully, our code for the contingency we had prepared. "The one to Iceland to see the northern lights." Claire nodded, understanding. "Emily would love that, something special just for her." For years, Emily had been fascinated by astronomy and natural phenomena. An Iceland trip to witness the aurora borealis had been her dream. One repeatedly deferred as Marcus's annual family vacations took precedence. The next phase required precision timing. Using Hammond as an intermediary, I arranged a confidential meeting with SEC investigators who had been quietly examining Westcrest's trading patterns. Rather than positioning myself as a whistleblower seeking immunity, I presented as a concerned, former executive with contextual information about legitimate structural anomalies. "These trading algorithms are mathematically complex," I explained, walking them through technical details most financial investigators wouldn't grasp. "What appears irregular is actually an intentional feature designed to capitalize on specific market inefficiencies." The explanation was truthful but incomplete. I was helping them distinguish between legitimate algorithmic trading and Marcus's systematic fraud, not to accelerate their investigation, but to focus it precisely where it would prove most damaging when eventually triggered. I never wanted to be the public face of Marcus's downfall. I wanted the system itself to reject him, like an immune response to infection. With the regulatory groundwork laid, I executed the most delicate part of our strategy. Through a Byzantine series of transactions, I acquired controlling interest in American Community Bank, a mid-sized institution that operated as the legitimate face for several of Marcus's most questionable financial vehicles. The acquisition remained hidden behind layers of corporate structures, but the operational changes were immediate. Compliance officers received new guidance requiring enhanced due diligence on certain transaction patterns, specifically those matching Marcus's preferred methods. Simultaneously, I initiated quiet outreach to specific Westcrest board members I had identified as potential allies, not with accusations against Marcus, but with observations about unexplained patterns in quarterly results. Richard Harmon, the CFO who had warned me about Marcus's trap, proved particularly receptive to reviewing anomalies that affected his certification of financial statements. "I'm not suggesting impropriety," I told him during a discreet meeting at my attorney's office. "But these recurring discrepancies in reported earnings versus actual cash positions warrant closer examination." "Why bring this to me instead of the audit committee?" he asked. "Because you're the only executive who's demonstrated commitment to accurate financial reporting, regardless of political consequences." This wasn't flattery, but calculated truth. Richard had twice delayed quarterly filings to resolve discrepancies against considerable pressure, actions that had temporarily damaged his standing with Marcus but preserved his professional integrity. Every person has a breaking point where self-preservation overrides loyalty. I was simply helping Richard find his. As the family investment Meeting approached, Marcus accelerated his counterattacks. Claire was abruptly removed from 3 family foundation boards with vague explanations about restructuring. Emily received letters from her remaining college applications citing mysterious withdrawals. Most tellingly, Hammond reported that Marcus had engaged a prestigious law firm known for aggressive criminal defense work. "He's preparing for something," Hammond observed. "The question is whether he's discovered your strategy or is simply covering his broader exposure." The answer came a week before the scheduled family meeting. Marcus requested a private dinner with Claire. Sister to sister, no spouses. She returned, ashen-faced. "He offered me immunity," she said, her voice steady despite her pallor. "Said, he knows you've been systematically targeting his business interests and that, when the evidence comes out, it will implicate me as well. He's prepared to tell the family and authorities that I was manipulated, not complicit. What does he want? In exchange? Complete dissociation from you. Divorce, full custody of Emily, immediate relocation to the Reed family compound in Greenwich." Her hands trembled slightly. "He said it's the only way to protect Emily's future." "And what did you say?" "That I needed time to consider what's best for our daughter." She straightened. "He believes I'm wavering, that years of family conditioning will override my loyalty to you." I took her hands in mine. "Would you like me to step back? We could pause everything, find another way." "No," she said firmly. "He threatened my daughter's future to protect himself. He used family as a weapon. There is no stepping back." Looking back, that was the moment Marcus truly lost. He had attacked the one thing that mattered more to Claire than family legacy. Her child. That night, we finalized every detail of our counter-strategy. The next morning, I placed a series of perfectly timed trades through our network of controlled entities, creating a cascade of ownership transfers that would culminate precisely during the family investment meeting. 3 days before the meeting, I received an unexpected call from Richard Harmon. "The external auditors have flagged significant irregularities in Westcrest's reported assets under management," he said without preamble. "Marcus has directed me to certify alternative calculations, but the discrepancies exceed materiality thresholds." "What are you going to do?" I asked. "My job," he replied simply. "I've informed Marcus I cannot certify the statements as presented. He suggested I take additional time to review the methodology." The final piece was in place. Marcus was now fighting containment actions on multiple fronts: regulatory scrutiny, auditor, concerns, and the invisible pressure from my strategic acquisitions. Most crucially, he remained unaware of how completely he had been surrounded. The night before the family meeting, I prepared the envelope that Emily would receive while her cousins celebrated their educational trusts. Inside wasn't just documentation of our Iceland trip, though the first-class tickets and luxury accommodations were included. It contained something far more valuable: irrefutable evidence of her vindication and her future security. As we dressed for the meeting, Emily asked the question that had remained unspoken through our months of preparation. "After tomorrow, will there be any way back? For any of us?" Claire and I exchanged glances. The question wasn't just about Marcus, but about the entire Reed family structure that had supported and enabled him for decades. "Some structures can't be repaired once their fundamental flaws are exposed," I answered honestly. "They can only be rebuilt from the foundation." Emily nodded, her expression solemn yet resolved. At 17, she understood better than most adults that some betrayals redefine the architecture of entire lives. "Then let's make sure the new foundation is stronger," she said. In that moment, watching my daughter stand tall despite everything Marcus had done to break her, I knew with absolute certainty that we would win. Not just the battle for Westcrest, but the war for something far more valuable: our future, reclaimed from the man who tried to steal it. The Reed family investment meeting convened in the walnut-paneled boardroom of Westcrest Capital, where paintings of 4 generations of patriarchs overlooked the proceedings. 23 family members filled the custom-made conference table, with Marcus at its head, the living embodiment of the Reed legacy. Claire, Emily, and I were seated at the far end, our placement a calculated statement of our diminished status. I had expected nothing less. Marcus called the meeting to order with practiced gravitas, reviewing the family's collective financial position with selective highlights of the past year's performance. No mention was made of the regulatory inquiries, auditor concerns, or unexplained asset fluctuations I knew were consuming his private hours. I sat quietly, watching a man who still believed he was in control. Despite market turbulence, the Reed family portfolio has maintained its historically exceptional returns, he announced, nodding toward Richard Harmon, who sat rigidly beside the projection screen. Richard's team has once again demonstrated why Westcrest remains the gold standard for wealth management. Richard's acknowledging nod was nearly imperceptible, his discomfort visible only to those who knew to look for it. After the standard financial review, Marcus transitioned to the special agenda item with theatrical solemnity. Today marks one of my favorite family traditions, the formal establishment of educational trust funds for our next generation. Assistants distributed embossed leather portfolios to 7 cousins, each containing documentation of multi-million-dollar trusts established in their names. As each young person received their portfolio, Marcus offered personalized commentary on their potential and the family's investment in their future. Caroline, your architectural studies at Yale continue our family's commitment to building lasting legacies. Michael, your acceptance to Harvard Business School extends a Reed tradition now in its 5th generation. Taylor, though you've chosen Stanford over traditional Reed destinations, your computer science focus positions you perfectly for the technological transformation of finance. Each presentation was met with approving murmurs and gentle applause from the assembled family. With every portfolio distributed, every future celebrated, the absence of Emily's name grew increasingly conspicuous. When the final portfolio had been presented, Marcus paused dramatically, surveying the room before his gaze settled on our end of the table. "Family," he said, his voice modulated to convey reluctance. "There is one additional matter we must address. As you know, recent months have brought unexpected challenges to Westcrest. While I've tried to shield you from the details, integrity demands transparency among family." Every eye in the room turned toward me as Marcus continued. "David's actions have placed substantial portions of our collective assets at risk. The evidence suggests a years-long campaign to undermine the company while extracting proprietary intellectual property." He sighed heavily. "Out of respect for Claire, I've resisted pursuing criminal charges, instead focusing on containment and recovery." I felt Emily tense beside me. Claire reached for her hand. Not a single family member looked surprised. The narrative had been carefully established over months. "Most concerning," Marcus continued, "is the potential impact on Emily's future. While tradition would dictate establishing her educational trust today, fiduciary responsibility requires us to temporarily withhold these funds until the full extent of liability is determined." Emily sat perfectly still beside me, her expression neutral despite the public humiliation being orchestrated. Claire's hand found mine beneath the table, a gentle squeeze signaling readiness. "If I may," I said, rising slowly. Every face registered surprise. Not at what I might say, but that I would dare speak at all. This was the moment I had been planning for 14 years. Marcus recovered quickly. "Of course, David. The floor is yours. First, I want to thank the Reed family for welcoming me 14 years ago," I began, my voice steady and measured. "The lessons I've learned about family loyalty and legacy have been invaluable." Confused glances circulated around the table as I reached into my jacket and withdrew a cream-colored envelope, placing it in Emily's hands. "Emily, your mother and I wanted to give you something special to mark this occasion," I said. "Something that reflects your unique interests rather than prescribed traditions." Emily opened the envelope with careful precision, reviewing its contents silently before looking up at me with perfect understanding of what the documents represented. "Iceland?" she said clearly, for the benefit of the room. "To see the northern lights?" "The trip is just the beginning," I replied. "The rest is your inheritance, not just of wealth, but of truth." Marcus rose abruptly. "How touching. Perhaps we should move to the next agenda item." Actually, Emily interrupted, holding up a formal document. I believe this is directly relevant to family business. She turned to address the room. This certifies that as of 9 a.m. this morning, I am the majority shareholder of West Crest Capital. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. That's obviously impossible. West Crest is a privately held company controlled by Reed family trusts. That was true until recently, I acknowledged. But corporate structures like buildings require constant maintenance. Neglect key structural elements and the entire edifice becomes vulnerable. Richard Harmon cleared his throat. I received confirmation from our transfer agent this morning. Ownership positions representing 51.3% of voting shares were consolidated under a new holding company. He paused. The beneficial owner is listed as Emily Parker. I wondered if anyone else could hear the foundations crumbling. Marcus's face flushed with rage. This is corporate theft, whatever manipulations you've engineered. We're entirely legal, Hammond interjected from the doorway where he now stood with two SEC officials. Every transaction has been documented and verified by independent counsel. What exactly is happening here? Marcus's mother demanded, her aristocratic composure cracking. I looked at Claire, who nodded and rose to stand beside me. For the past year, she explained to her family, Marcus has been systematically looting West Crest through a network of shell companies. When David discovered the fraud, Marcus orchestrated his removal and began dismantling the safeguards David had built into the company's financial systems. Absurd, Marcus spat. Mother, this is Claire's husband manipulating her against her own family. Claire continued as if he hadn't spoken. What Marcus didn't realize is that David anticipated every move, documenting everything while strategically acquiring controlling positions in the entities Marcus used to hide his activities. Hammond stepped forward. The SEC has been investigating these irregularities for months. Their preliminary findings suggest approximately $1.4 billion in client and company assets have been diverted through these structures. The older family members exchanged alarmed glances as the implications became clear. This wasn't just about internal power struggles. It threatened the entire Reed fortune. I had learned long ago that the most effective way to defeat a narcissist is to turn their own system against them. Marcus fought for control. This is a coordinated attack on our family. Whatever David has told you is supported by forensic accounting evidence, Richard interrupted, sliding a report across the table. As CFO, I can no longer certify our financial statements without substantial restatements. Hammond motioned to the SEC officials. Given the circumstances, the Commission has authorized me to inform the board that formal enforcement proceedings will commence tomorrow morning. As the reality of his situation dawned, Marcus made a final desperate pivot. The algorithms, he said frantically. David is claiming ownership of proprietary technologies he developed while employed here. That's corporate theft, regardless of any other considerations. Actually, I said quietly, I'm claiming inheritance rights to intellectual property originally developed by Thomas Parker under his partnership agreement with Alexander Reed, your father. I slid a document across the table. The original partnership agreement, thought to be lost during my father's trial. The room went completely still. Your father? Marcus's mother whispered. Thomas Parker was my father, I confirmed. The man your son framed for financial fraud 20 years ago. The man who died of a heart attack during the trial Marcus engineered. The man whose life's work Marcus stole, just as he tried to steal mine. I had never spoken this truth aloud in 14 years at West Crest. The power of it silenced even Marcus. Every algorithm running West Crest's trading systems is derived from my father's original work, I continued, which according to this agreement remains jointly owned intellectual property. I'm not claiming full ownership, just my legal inheritance. Looking back, I can still see the exact moment Marcus understood he had lost everything. Why? He finally asked, his voice barely audible. Why work here for 14 years? Why wait? Because architects understand that to truly dismantle something, you must first understand exactly how it's built. I met his gaze. And because you needed to reveal who you truly are, not just to me but to everyone who trusted you. In the chaos that followed, board members demanded emergency sessions, family members sought private legal counsel, and Marcus sat motionless, abandoned by allies who suddenly feared association. As security escorted him from the building he had entered that morning as its king, Marcus stopped beside Emily. "You'll never be accepted in this world," he hissed. "You're not a Reed." Emily smiled. "Thank you," she said simply. "That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me." 1 year later, Westcrest Capital had emerged from its restructuring stronger than before. I served as executive chairman, with Richard Harmon as CEO. The Reed family retained minority ownership, their influence proportionately diminished. Most significantly, Emily headed the newly established Parker Foundation for Educational Opportunity, funded by the recovered assets from Marcus's fraud. Marcus himself awaited trial on 47 counts of securities fraud, money laundering, and wire fraud. His attempts to negotiate a plea deal had been rejected by prosecutors armed with evidence we had meticulously compiled. On a clear autumn morning, Emily and I visited a simple granite headstone in a Queens cemetery. "Do you think he would approve?" she asked as we placed stones on my father's grave. "Using the Reed fortune to fund scholarships for girls interested in quantitative finance?" "I think he would appreciate the structural elegance," I replied, taking what was destroyed and using it to build something better. That evening, as our family gathered for dinner, Claire raised her glass. "To justice," she said, "and to the architect who designed it." I shook my head. "To foundations," I corrected, "and to making sure they're built to last. Family isn't always what you're born into. Sometimes it's what you build after everything else falls apart."